with us this afternoon, first of all, if I could introduce Mr. Todd Fuller, QC. Todd is a Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions in Queensland, an extremely experienced criminal lawyer, having been admitted to the bar in 1989, so quite a long time ago, and took silk in 2010. And most importantly, from our perspective, he serves on the Griffith Law School Visiting Committee, which is kind of a quaint name, and there are historical reasons for that, but it's essentially the law school's external advisory board where members of the profession ensure that we're doing what we should be doing as a law school and give us lots of advice and support in doing that to ensure that you all have the quality education that you deserve. And I'm also delighted to introduce to you Danielle Hanson. Danielle graduated from Griffith Law School at the Gold Coast campus in 2015, so it's not that long ago that she was like one of you. And she is now a senior criminal lawyer working at Potts Lawyers on the Gold Coast, and she works in criminal law generally, but also in domestic and family violence disputes. And also she's one of those new age lawyers who hosts an Instagram page and does a lot of work, which I'm seeing amongst a lot of young lawyers, which I think is so impressive, which is largely about really fostering a sense of community in the legal profession and support for one another, which I think makes it a much more enjoyable profession than it may perhaps have been at some times in the past. So thank you so much for joining us, Danielle. So we might start with Todd, if that's all right, Todd. And if I could just ask you to share with our students a bit of your story, really, your career journey, and along the way, any tips or tricks that you might be able to share with them.
All right, thanks, Therese. I've got a little bit of a PowerPoint that accompanies the things that I want to talk about. So if we can switch across to that, we're all good to go. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, not because I'm a narcissist, but so you have a bit of a sense of who I am. I'm going to talk a little bit about my role at the ODPP and what I've done. And finally, I'm going to make a couple of observations about that journey. From the outset, I've got a couple of disclaimers that I need to make. The first is that I'm institutionalised. For those of you old enough to remember the Shawshank Redemption, I've spent my entire working life as a criminal prosecutor, and that's my skill set and the way that I look at things within the law. Secondly, I love my job and what I do. I've been very lucky in the opportunities that have been presented to me and the people that have shaped my career. The third, as you'll see, is that I'm the king of props. Advocacy, engagement, it's really important to do those sort of things. And whilst a picture may paint 1,000 words, handing over a semi-automatic weapon to a jury is just the ticket. And finally, the thing I want to talk about is that there's nothing special about me. I'm not a candidate on X Factor. I've got no real backstory. I'm a very ordinary person who has at times been exposed to some extraordinary things. So my view of the world is my own, but you may gain something from it or you may not. The world would be a very uninspiring place if we were filled with clones. At the outset, I'd like to thank the university for the opportunity to talk to you guys because you've got busy lives and lots of academic pressures. But I think it's great that you've taken time to come in here and listen to Danielle and myself, because all experiences, whether they're good or bad, with people you meet in the law, add to the information upon which you can make decisions and help you make better ones. So the issue is that you've got an important part of your legal education. They're exposed to different pathways of the profession and what they do, and make some informed choices about where your degree can take you. I don't know if you've got a firm view about what your careers are likely to take you or what you want out of them. Is it about securing your future income, the intellectual stimulation, or wanting to do something for the community? In some cases, you perhaps didn't know what else you wanted to do. But there's all types of lawyers. There's the combative ones, there's the colourful and quirky ones, there's the animated ones, and then there's the old school. They're all legitimate motivations. Your degree is just a stepping stone to somewhere else, either legal practice, government, politics, academia, the business world, and all being advocates. They're advocates in all walks of life, and a very narrow band of them appear in court, and a narrow band still in jury trials. When I looked up the Bar Association website today, there's just over 1,000 barristers registered in Queensland. 845 of those are junior counsel and 134 of them are silks. Oh, I should have left out the new school. And then there are 300 lawyers at the ODPP, of which about 85 are trial lawyers. So let's talk a little bit about me. I was 9 years of age in that photograph. I come from a middle-class family with no real connections to the law, only obeying it. But I'm from Tasmania, so that wasn't always the case because my family has a convict past. Nothing too dramatic, just a couple of thieves who found love in a harsh land. My parents were both from small country towns in Tasmania. My father did a trade before becoming a school teacher, and my mother did office work and then sales in a later life. They both valued education, and my father in particular has a strong sense of social justice. I was not exposed to any form of violence, emotional abuse or deprivation as a child, and except limited by the media, it never touched directly upon my life. Given my age, obviously the internet in a publicly accessible form or social media didn't exist when I was a child or when I went to law school. I had no idea when I went to law school what I wanted to do or where my future career lay. I went to law school by default, and once I was there, I didn't find that it provided me with any real guidance around where I could end up with a degree or where I would end up without it. Another disclaimer, I went to another institution rather than your own. I found the law school was an extension of my schooling. I went, I learnt, I passed exams, my future was some way off. What I knew was that I didn't want to do articles in a solicitor's firm. That was a thing back then. I wanted to be a talker. It's not that I had a love for the law, and to be honest, I've never fallen in love with the law. We're just good friends. But I must admit that I've become enamoured with its application in the criminal sphere, and I've had a very rewarding career as a result. And it's because it's the people business and I'm a people person. My career was shaped by two experiences while I was at law school. Both of them involved the generosity of people in the profession, something that isn't always acknowledged enough. The first was when I did a period of work experience in my first year at law school with a barrister named Phil Hack. He's now Phil Hack QC and was for a time His Honour as the Deputy President of the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. That was 1985. Well before most of you were born. In that time, before online libraries and search engines, we used things called books. I spent 2 weeks in chambers following him around and others, and it was an adventure. I got to wear a suit and feel important and have a front row seat watching other people's lives. I saw my first criminal trial from the inside and my first contact with a person who was going to jail. He was an ordinary family man who had his own business and committed a rudimentary fraud on the Commonwealth to keep it afloat. He forged some documents to get some goods out of customs without paying for them. He was prosecuted by the now Chief Justice before a judge I was later to appear in front of. That judge seemed larger in life in the dingy old windowless panelled rooms of the District Court, which would later become my second home. They're gone now, replaced with the open and airy courts of glass, wood and concrete and the automatic blinds that lower themselves at the most inopportune times during trials. But the case against him was overwhelming and he held on to hope until the end, but he hadn't told his wife about the offence, the trial or the risk of his incarceration. She found out after he was convicted. She was devastated and very emotional when she came to the court. I also remember the moment for the compassion at the end. He was a member of the Sikh faith and therefore did not cut his hair and had it in a top knot. He was less concerned about going to prison than he was about the fact that he may have to cut his hair, a fear that the police orderly dealt with really empathetically. And all through it, Phil and his solicitor acted as counsellor, confidant, lawyer and advocate. It was a human drama which was both fascinating and educational, where everyone carried a great responsibility and where the process had real consequences. It wasn't about what the law was or who was right and who was wrong. It was about the people the law touched. The second epiphany for me came during a period of work experience that occurred on the Gold Coast when we travelled down there for a hearing in the District Court. It wasn't a criminal matter, so the details of it really escaped me. Whilst waiting to get on, we sat in a room and talked with another barrister, Terry Martin, who was later to become Terry Martin SC, and then His Honour Judge Martin SC in the District Court, and famous for defending Ivan Milat, the killer and inspiration for Wolf Creek. He and Phil started talking about a recent High Court case in torts, a name which sticks with me 35 years later, Hackshaw and Shaw, which was delivered in 1985. In a time before databases, people waited till the book came out to read it. It was one of those cases you never forget, and even though I haven't done anything tortious for 35 years, my ears pricked up. I'd just done an assignment on it. I could actually engage in an intelligent conversation with these two experienced lawyers about something. It was an important lesson for me to listen to those around you and don't be dismissive of others based on a lack of experience. The most junior person in the room may actually know more about the topic and has turned their mind to it and may actually make the biggest contribution. The next step for me was when I did work experience here in the office, halfway through my third year in 1987. The then director was Des Sturgis, and from day one I was smitten. We got to go to court every day. The trials and appeals were interesting. I didn't see a murder trial or anything salacious at that stage, but I got to watch the law in action. For me, it crystallised and a career came about. I wanted to be an advocate, and I considered that I had a skill set that I could use here at the ODPP. A year later, I applied for a clerk's position, and they rang me up and invited me to come and start the job straight away. My year as a clerk was close to the best year of my working life. All care and no responsibility. I was assigned to a prosecutor named Adrian Gundelach. He gave me a wonderful education in the law and in life. That was because he was larger than life. He was a very engaging individual, both in and out of court, with a wonderful jury advocate. He always had a story to tell, some of which was actually true. He commanded a presence in front of the juries, and they often hung on his every word. His addresses were crafted and scripted for maximum effect. I realised, however, that his court performances were predicated on the work around him. Being his clerk meant I had to pass into the world of high-profile matters because that's the type of trials he did, most of which were killings. Another life lesson for that is you are always going to be reliant on others. Treat them well and engage with them. It led to me, following my admission in July of 1989, at a time when I was just before my 22nd birthday. And that wasn't unusual in this office at the time. We had a lot of people who were admitted around 21 or 22 years of age. The day I was admitted, the director invited me up, and it was a seminal moment in my career. He told me that he had confidence in my ability and he wanted me to do trials straight away. In fact, I did my first trial the week after I was admitted. It was in front of a judge known as Black Jack Kimmins. His nickname was not card related, but based on his lack of tolerance for fools. He was, however, a wonderful man. I was briefed to prosecute a woman who was a getaway driver who claimed she'd just been helping her boyfriend, who she thought was jumping over the back fence just to collect his TV. The director sought me out, sat down with me, talked through it, and told me that he wanted to give me the best education he could with respect to starting out. We drove out to the house where the break-in occurred. He walked me through what I needed to do. He talked me through what I needed to do. He showed me the other thing that's important in our careers, and that's mentoring, finding time and making the person at the centre of your attention. He was enthusiastic and supported and wanted nothing but the best for me. I lost the trial, but learned a lot of valuable lessons. Advocacy isn't about the words. You need to understand the relationships and the people, and to be a jury advocate to get the best out of witnesses and still sell your story to the jury. I also learned it's not about winning and losing. You should take joy in neither, because you may do your best and still end up with a loss. Sometimes you don't do very well and end up with a win. It's all about balance and self-reflection. I found myself, and I should go back to that one, junioring the director that year. So in my first year following admission, I found myself in the High Court of Australia sitting next to him in the matter of Beck and the Queen. Those of you familiar with the criminal law, it's about non-accidental presence. I'd instructed on the trial, so I saw it from start to finish till it ended in a dismissed appeal in the High Court. So my view of the world is now very different. Being involved in the application to real people's lives has exposed me sometimes to the extremes of human behaviour and its consequences. I've been part of the inner sanctum of individuals and families who've suffered great loss, people who have transgressed the boundaries of ordinary human behaviour in ways that are extraordinary. Makes you wonder at times about people's moral compass. Just before I finish, I just want to talk about the individuals who are depicted on this slide. One of them may be familiar to some of you because it was a high-profile matter. It's sometimes difficult to humanise the situation that these people who are all killers, bar, of course, Alison Baden-Clay and George, who's on the bottom corner. And that's because people do monstrous things, but they're not monsters. They are still people, they think and act like them, and often make poor, selfish decisions or sometimes revel in the pain of others. The law is not always about morality, it's about the effects it has on people. It's not about the white hats and the black hats, there's often a lot of grey in what we do. And often the stakes are pretty high on both sides, particularly where the offence was violent or resulted in death. Since about 2005, my career has involved death. People who have killed other people. The top left-hand corner as you look at it, that man there killed Scott and his girlfriend, Cindy, over a $50,000 debt. He shot Scott in the head and then stabbed Cindy to death when he was unable to shoot her. The man on the right, captured playing football, which he was known for, killed his new girlfriend's ex-boyfriend with a hammer during a violent argument in a domestic situation. The two in the middle, the lady with the vest on, which she used to help disguise her figure during a robbery, and the man to her left, killed a police officer. He was shot when he turned up at a tavern on the Gold Coast they were robbing. And the man on the left turned his gun and shot him in the face and killed him. The man on the middle on the right killed his new girlfriend's ex-girlfriend. And after shooting him in the head, concreted him into a barrel and threw him away in a creek. But all of those families, Damien's family, Norm's family, Nick's family, the victims of all of those matters, have all been part of my life during those trials, as have the families of some of these people who've come to court to see what was going on. Because trials are about winners and losers and about impacts. In each of these cases, somebody lost their life, but also somebody was also convicted, and there was a significant impact on them and their families. So to come to an end to my little piece of this, I've had a front row seat, as I said, in other people's lives since I first did work experience back in 1985, and had an impact upon them, both good and bad. I've had to manage expectations as a prosecutor, manage outcomes, be emotionally resilient and able to take criticism and loss. We don't always get things right as lawyers, and our decisions are later held up to review, sometimes in the highest court in this land, sometimes by 7 of the brightest legal minds. And that can be years later. So what can I leave you with? You pick up a particular set of skills. Some of those you hone in law school, some of those you will hone throughout your career. What you do with them is up to you. It doesn't make you particularly important or special, but it does mean as lawyers that we can make a contribution to the community. Don't forget that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction in the legal world, and people are actually affected by what we choose to do and how we choose to apply the law. And so my last statement to you is often lamented by Maxwell Smart, again, a character well before your time. Use your cleverness for niceness and not for evil. Thanks, Therese.
Thank you so much, Todd, for that really engaging presentation. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions at the end. And particularly, I loved the way you brought in personal traits like resilience and some of the skills that you acquire which we can't necessarily teach at law school, but they really are central to a professional career. And yeah, that was fantastic. So Danielle, over to you now.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks, Todd. That was fantastic. I learned a lot out of that too. I am going to start with
You've just gone on mute, Danielle.
Sorry, don't know how that happened. I'm going to start by saying that I don't have a slide. I'm sorry. Similar to Todd, that was fantastic though. My career in law, as Trey said earlier, started in 2015. I grew up on the Gold Coast here. I graduated from Miami State High School in 2009. I then started at Griffith University in 2010, so straight away. I then graduated in 2015 and begun my career as a criminal defence lawyer at Potts Lawyers, and I've been here ever since. So my thought process, I guess, as I was studying, and my decision to be a criminal defence lawyer happened fairly early on. And I did legal studies while I was studying high school, and was very blessed to have an incredible legal studies teacher, which the more that I speak with other lawyers seems to be quite a common thread in terms of passionate teachers who then craft, people's way in what they decide to do in their career. So in grade 12, I actually did a major project on wrongful convictions and the Innocence Project that was over in the US at that point in time. And at that stage, the Innocence Project had been established here on the Gold Coast at our very own Griffith University. And it intrigued me, and I had a lot of questions, and I had a lot of passion, I guess, for wanting to be involved in this system that clearly had its mistakes and clearly had some very big repercussions for getting things wrong. Todd obviously has a lot more experience than I do, but we really do have a front row seat to people's lives, and it's been extremely intriguing to see how what a difference, I guess, it can make to having a good defence lawyer who cares and, is involved in the process and wanting to make sure that, it goes through as smoothly as possible with as little mistakes as possible, versus someone who perhaps isn't as passionate. So as soon as I did that project, I was set. I was going to Griffith University no matter what, and I was going to be doing the Innocence Project. So I knew from that, that very project that's what I wanted to do with my career and my life. So I managed to get myself direct entry into Griffith, and I started out in a law and Bachelor of Psychology at the time, or psychological science as it was. I dropped the psychological science pretty early on due to work commitments, unfortunately, but the degree of criminology then got picked up, I think, into my third year. So as I was doing my law degree, you had to go through all of the subjects that you think at the time is extremely boring, like corporate law and torts and contracts and the like. And I stuck with it. There was a part in my second year where I said, this is just way too hard and I don't want this anymore, and I'm going to be a flight attendant. So I actually ended up applying to a whole bunch of airlines. But I'm glad I stuck with it. I didn't actually have any time off, and I made some incredible friends during my studies, so that are still very close to me to this day. So I ended up doing my Innocence Project semester in the first semester of 2014. And I fell in love, and I knew that I wanted to be part of this system and ensuring that I was helping people that, hopefully wouldn't be in this position where, they're having to seek assistance. They've gone through the process, as Todd said, of the appeals, and often, to the Court of Appeal if it needed to go that far. And their last resort really was seeing whether there was anything else that, anybody could do. And so I did my semester, absolutely loved it. I then attended the Meet the Profession event that Griffith holds, and I think that was in August. It actually popped up on my Facebook memories the other day. It was in August of 2014, I think it was. And I met Erin Mitchell, who is at Potts Lawyers. She's a director here now. and Mark Williams, who's also a director here at Potts Lawyers. And I met the both of them, and Erin and I had an instant connection. We spoke about the Innocence Project. It seemed like I'd just met my twin, to be honest. Her and I had a big chat about the Innocence Project and the passion that we had for it. And not long after that, I'd emailed Erin asking for some work experience at Potts. And from there, I begun my 2 weeks work experience at Potts. I stayed on working volunteer work for a little bit. And then once I graduated in July of 2015, I began my PLT time at Potts Lawyers as well. So you would have heard Todd say that he did an article, didn't want to do an article, but back then that's what it was called. Now, obviously, we have the benefit of doing PLT and it doesn't take as long, which is the benefit for us. We get to get stuck into it much quicker. But I did my PLT. I was admitted at the end of 2015 in December, and begun my career as a solicitor at Potts. So my career perhaps is quite similar to Todd's in that I've stuck with the same place for quite a long time, not quite as long as Todd, but I have thoroughly enjoyed being a defence lawyer, and perhaps the best part of my job is that I am such a people person, same as Todd, and I've really enjoyed being able to see how people do make mistakes. Todd, he hit it on the head. I'm probably repeating a lot of what you said, but you see these people come into you, and some of the, often you'll read the prosecutions or the police, summary of facts beforehand. So you've got a good idea about what you're going to be dealing with before you actually meet the person. And as a human, I guess your instinct is perhaps to judge a little, perhaps, and to be reading this and thinking, oh my goodness, this is just absolutely horrible. How can somebody do something like this? But you meet this person and you realize that they're a person, and we've had some pretty horrendous allegations before us, and some people go on to be convicted of those allegations. But you meet this person, and often you're helping them through what is going to be probably their most vulnerable time and their most stressful time of their life, and you guide them through this system that often they probably don't know a whole lot about, given that majority of these people that end up next to us or across the room from us come from a lower socioeconomic family and have a lot of mental health or drug or alcohol issues. So you see people make mistakes, well, not mistakes, but they are mistakes all the time. They're stupid decisions that lead them in a whole lot of trouble and that can affect their life, their family's life, and a whole lot of other things that perhaps they weren't thinking about when they decided to do what they did. So my passion for criminal law is, as I said, it started out very young, I guess, and I knew that that's exactly what I wanted to go in and do. Now I work side by side with Erin, and as Trace mentioned, we run an Instagram called Lady Crim Lawyers. What we do on that Instagram, or what we like to do, is, I guess, just provide or give back to people that are following us and provide information about the criminal law and a bit of an insight, I guess, as to what we do day to day as criminal lawyers. So we really enjoy that sort of aspect in giving back, and particularly to students, because I was very fortunate, similar to Todd, to have some very supportive mentors in my career progression, particularly at Potts, but there have certainly been some other mentors outside of our firm that have helped guide me through that. As I said, that started with my legal studies teacher, but there were certainly some lecturers at Griffith as well that I still stay in contact with to this day. I'm back at the Innocence Project, so I'm actually one of our lawyers, volunteer lawyers that work at the Innocence Project now, and some of the cases that we're dealing with, there's cases back from the 80s and 90s where, there's been a significant, development in DNA particularly, but also some, other different types of evidence where we're reviewing that and examining to see whether there is anything left at all for these people that have been convicted of some pretty awful crimes. In terms of, I guess, the types of matters in the day-to-day of my job, every day is different, as I'm sure Todd's is as well. A lot of my work, sorry, I've got some noises happening in the background. A lot of my work tends to happen in the magistrates court as a solicitor level, and anything that goes up to the district court or the Supreme Court, obviously depending on the charge, we tend to get a barrister involved. So in Queensland, if you weren't already aware, we have, if you go sort of to defence work, you have solicitors and barristers. And my conscious decision to remain a solicitor is very much because I love the people aspect of what I do. I get to meet with our clients, you know, quite often. I get to speak with them over the phone. And you become a part of their lives in a sense. Obviously, there's a need to disconnect and be, you know, unbiased and removed, I guess, from their emotions. You're not there to be a vehicle for their emotions at all, but you do become a part of their lives. And I only finished a matter last year, actually, that I had since I was, before I was a solicitor. And you know, I'd seen their kids grow up, and I'd seen, you know, aspects of their lives that had, you know, gone on outside of these court proceedings. But you do have a sense, I guess, of you learning about them and, you know, knowing them as a person. So I guess I love that people aspect of what I do. It sounds like Todd gets that sort of aspect as well in the prosecution, but perhaps just the other side, so more so. But in terms of the day-to-day of what we do, you'll find me probably most days in court over in the Magistrates Court here in Southport, if not perhaps one of the other regional courts. We get to do conferences a lot of days with our clients, and as I said, that's sort of, you know, finding out from them what their instructions are on the matter, whether that's pleading guilty or not guilty, or whether perhaps there needs to be some negotiations with the prosecution. I find that, you know, there is a nice little balance in what we do between getting to meet with people and having that sort of human side of the job versus getting to do a little bit of, you know, turn your law brain on and, you know, writing submissions to the prosecution and, you know, getting that sort of aspect of really analysing case law and all of that sort of thing. So it is a nice balance to be able to jump between the two, I guess, frames of mind throughout the day. The types of clients that we deal with here at Potts, they range. I have clients at the moment in my cupboard that are charged with drink driving type offences, so traffic sort of matters, up to, you know, the more serious homicides of murder and manslaughter and everything. So there's quite a diverse range of the types of matters we do get to deal with. Our firm in particular doesn't do any legal aid work, so our funding is from clients and their families. And, you know, if you do go into criminal defence work, there are firms that, you know, do that legal aid work. And we did for a little bit when I first started out, and that was a very insightful experience. The types of matters I found that you were dealing with, the difference between the legal aid versus non-legal aid was quite significant. There was a lot more mental health, drug, alcohol issues that we were dealing with legal aid type work. And again, it's probably more so with their background of being mostly from lower socioeconomic sort of families and growing up. Lots of, you know, family violence, domestic violence type issues. Whereas, you know, in my position as a private lawyer, we have a lot of professionals come to see us. We've had students come to see us that are studying law. We've had lawyers, we've had doctors, we've had, you know, psychologists, people from all sort of walks of life, which I think perhaps makes it a little bit more interesting as well, because it makes you really think that, you know, it's just one mistake and one little aspect of their life that could throw off a massive impact in many aspects of their life. So that's sort of I guess the difference there. So if you are looking to go into criminal defence, do a little bit of research, I guess, as to what the firm does and whether they do legal aid or whether they do private work. And, you know, perhaps it might be good to get experience from both. I know I've certainly had that sort of experience, albeit for a year, with the legal aid work, to realise that that's perhaps not what I really want to do. But I think that the experience is good because it does open you up to many other different issues that you wouldn't have otherwise been exposed to. So that's sort of my day-to-day as a lawyer. I'm certainly open to some questions and all of that sort of thing. So Therese, maybe if the students if you want to open it up to them.
Thanks so much, Danielle. That was really great. And I think too, being a relatively recent graduate, it's really nice for our students to have this opportunity to ask you some questions. So please, everyone start typing your questions in the chat box, or you can turn your mic on and speak. It might be easier though if we use the chat box, but I might just kick off. Oh, we've got one question already, but I'm just going to kick off first as well. And just ask you both, one of the real themes that came out in both of your presentations was the importance of mentors to both of your careers. And Danielle, you mentioned our Meet the Profession event, which sadly has to be online this year, which isn't quite the same. But hopefully next year we'll be back to face-to-face events. But I wondered if you could both talk about what advice you might have for students in making those types of connections and finding mentors, people who can really make a difference to their career. Maybe might start with you, Danielle, and then we'll go to Todd.
Okay,
yeah.
Absolutely. Some advice that I would have, I think as a student, I definitely had perhaps the misconception of thinking that any mentor is a good mentor. And having now, I guess, been in the profession for, half a decade, I have realized that perhaps there are some fantastic mentors out there that I think will really foster that, mentor relationship and assist you in your career path, whether that be as a student or even just as a young lawyer as well. But I think appreciating what you're wanting out of that relationship as well, whether that be, some work experience or whether that's perhaps just someone to be bouncing off, ideas or questions, whether that be ethical or whether that be practical questions about what you're doing at the moment. But realizing there's not just one mentor as well that you can turn to. There can be, as I mentioned, I was very blessed to have some amazing mentors, both within our firm and outside of our firm that I could turn to. But realizing, I guess, what you want out of that relationship and, not bombarding them, I guess, with too many questions. People are busy, but, appreciating what you want out of that relationship and really perhaps making that clear to the mentor as well. So that would probably be my best or biggest tip.
Thanks, Danielle. Todd?
I was going to echo that. I'd actually written down different things for different people. So that it's about recognising within your own network that exists already that you've got lots of opportunities to talk to the next people who are attached to those people. And I always like to talk about having champions. You need somebody who is your champion in a certain area. And that's both as a person and as a professional situation. And when you're a student, you don't always know who's best to attach to because you can't always judge whether the flash shiny thing that's in front of you is actually legitimate or that there are some other things you need to find out about those people as to that level of engagement. And I found that from actually doing work experience and sitting down and actually taking an opportunity to talk to people whilst I was doing work experience. I know that was 30 years ago. Now I assume you just DM them and that's how it all goes. But I certainly know from working within a hierarchy within this office and, the same way Danielle did, I can name a number of people who I think have had a real impact with respect to me in dealing with lots of things, not just the smartest lawyer in the room. Academics and really smart lawyers have their place, but you also need the people who keep you grounded and your interactions with people. And the other part of that is you also need somebody who helps mentor you away from the law so that you can close the door, close the files, leave other people's problems sitting on your desk and go out and enjoy your life so you can come back and pick up those people's problems and do your best job.
Such good advice.
Thank you. So we'll start looking at the questions now. So Tracy wanted to ask you, Todd, about how you handle the subject matter that you deal with, so murders, and whether you get very personally affected by having to deal with that sort of subject matter in your role.
Okay. Vicarious liability is a significant issue in the law, and particularly in the criminal law, and then it gets filtered down in the sort of work that we do. Criminal lawyers, and particularly, I'll say prosecutors in particular, because they're in court so often, deal with a lot of human misery. Part of it is, as I just spoke of, having things outside of work and not being totally consumed by your work. And the other thing is coming to terms with that it's somebody else's life. And that's an important thing to remember on both sides of the equation, because the decisions you make are impacting on a lot of other people, but those impacts aren't on you. So you're not the one going to jail. You're not the one who has lost their child. You're not the one who was sexually assaulted. And so you have to recognise there's only so many things you can do for the individual. So you can't take on all of their problems. There's the monkey theory of management, that if somebody comes in with their sick monkey, you don't let them leave it with you. You tell them how to look after their sick monkey and send them back out again. And prosecutors and criminal lawyers need to be that. As empathetic as you can be, you have to realise you're applying a skill set to a certain event that has occurred, that has people involved in it, and you have to be good at the people stuff, but you also have to be divorced from that and be able to put those borders around it. Obviously, when I'm dealing with people who are really, really traumatised and really, really emotional about things that have occurred, you can't put yourself in the shoes of somebody who has had their child violently killed, or their child has been in a fight and punched somebody and killed somebody and is then in court being held accountable for that. And it's a very, very human event, and you can't lose sight of that. But some people, it's not for you. If you don't come in with your eyes open to the criminal law and you can't deal with those sort of things, then it's perhaps not for you.
Absolutely. Can I add something as well? Equally important as to finding a mentor, I think you need to find your person within your career. I'm not sure whether you have the same, Todd, but there's a couple of colleagues of mine that I work with that after you just have a crappy day, you just need someone to unload that onto, even if it's just for 10 minutes, just to say, this is just, something I've had to deal with. I just need to talk about it or cry about it or whatever you need to do. And, that I think unloading that certainly, helps. It probably helps our partners as well. I know my husband appreciates the fact that I have a work wife that I can unload to and don't have to come home all stressed out and upset. But yeah, the job is just extremely stressful. There's some pretty traumatic things that we have to deal with. And I think finding that person and being able to unload like that is extremely important.
I think criminal lawyers are really collegiate, and I don't think it's just and I probably needed to make that point. For the system to work, we need good judges, we need good prosecutors, we need good defence counsel. And in fact, there's a judge who said the most important piece of paper in a trial was the appearance slip, because you knew what sort of day you were going to have by the personalities who are appearing in front of you. And we actually are supportive of each other across the table, and they're the sort of people that you can talk to and unload to. It's not about being little cliques about it. And I think that criminal lawyers recognise that amongst themselves, and we're a sort of cult, to be honest.
Yeah, that's very true.
Sounds like a fun cult. Okay. So Dina's got a couple of little questions. Danielle, did you know Mrs. Churchhouse at Miami?
Oh, yes, that's the teacher I was talking about. Dina, she's actually at Keeper Park now, and I still keep in very good touch with her.
And then Dina also had a question for Todd about, can you work at the DPP on the Gold Coast? All the opportunities seem to be in Brisbane.
Oh, no. We've got offices here right in Hong Kong, as they used to say, with MasterCard. So we've got nearly 400 staff around the state. So we've got an office in Cairns, in Townsville, in Rocky, Maroochydore. We've got an office in Toowoomba, in Ipswich, Beenleigh, and at Southport. So we've actually got 5 prosecutors. We've got nearly 30 odd staff at the Southport District Court. Wherever there's a permanent judge, we've got a permanent office. And just an ad-wise, that we have a WEP program that obviously didn't take place this year, where we do a work experience program where you can come and be with us for a month, and we take WEP students right around the state. So particularly at Southport, because Griffith has a campus down there, but we take work experience students in each of our offices if you have an interest in that area.
Fabulous, thank you. So Tobias has a couple of questions about getting your foot in the door for both prosecutions and criminal defence work. And I guess a follow-up question, which is related to that, Todd, what does the DPP really look for in its prospective, new graduate lawyers? So maybe Danielle, if you just want to talk about getting the foot in the door to be a criminal defence lawyer, and then we'll turn to Todd just to talk about what the DPP is looking for and how you get in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think getting your foot in the door, I'm going to approach this quite cautiously because, of course, what criminal lawyers mostly are looking for is work experience, which many people starting out certainly don't have. My suggestion to you would be, of course, just applying to firms and, asking for work experience to start with if you're still, not in your penultimate year, or, as early, I don't know what grades you guys are in at the moment, but as early as possible would be my suggestion. There's many firms that take on students from, second year, or, as early as you've done your criminal law subjects. So just getting that experience. I mentioned that I was going to approach this very cautiously, and I'm going to say this, and that is be aware of the types of firms that you'd like to apply for. You'll get a good idea about, a semi-good idea about what the firm is like from looking at their website, of course. You'll also get that same idea from their social medias, of if they are on social media. But more importantly, criminal law, such a good way to realize what types of lawyers are is by just going to court. There are open galleries, perhaps not so much at the moment with COVID, but there are open galleries that you can go into and see the way that, lawyers interact with other lawyers, the way they interact with prosecutors, and the types of persons, that they are. But the one tip that I would have, I'm very lucky that I've jumped into a firm that absolutely aligns with my ethics and my ethos, but just be very cautious when you are applying, because it's certainly not something that you should be thinking of, whatever firm, doesn't matter what it is, so long as I have my foot in the door. I very firmly believe that it needs to align with your values, and there are certainly some lawyers, perhaps another bit of research you should do is, by Googling the firm as well and seeing whether they're popping up. There are some lawyers that you certainly don't want to be getting experience from. And I think being very cautious about that is important, because when you're then applying for the firm that you really want to be involved with, they're going to be looking at the type of experience that you've had. And it's a very close network of criminal lawyers. We know everybody. So I think that is very important, being a little bit picky. But I do appreciate that in this particular market, that can be very difficult as well.
And so just a little follow-up, how would a student who doesn't have any connections with the law vet the good from the bad?
Well, as I said, I think the best part of that would be just going to court and seeing what they're like. I think that going to court nice and early as well, even the call over courts, as boring as they can be, if you're not, even if you are involved in the call over, it can still be boring. But I think that interactions with prosecutors and interactions with other lawyers says a lot about who somebody is as a person. So do your research, obviously figure out the types of firms. If you're on the Gold Coast, look, there's not many firms around, so you could easily do your research on who's part of the firms, who are the principals, go to court, scope them out, see what they're like, and having conversations with them. If you're in court, somebody's going to ask you what you're up to. And I had that experience. I was a student and went to court just to have a look. And I had a lawyer approach me. Now, knowing in hindsight who that lawyer is, I probably shouldn't have offered to do work experience with them. But, you do have lawyers that will just, say, hey, what are you doing here? Haven't seen you around before, because, it is a close network, particularly in Southport. So that would be my best bet. Go to court and just see what they're like.
Thanks, Danielle. That's great. So, Todd, what's the DPP looking for, and how do you get in there?
Okay, so obviously nearly all of us started here as clerks, so we have administrative positions. So in our structure we have Crown prosecutors, legal officers who do the solicitor's work in the office, and then our administrative support. When I say administrative support, most of them are admitted lawyers or studying law and soon to finish, and they progress up through the ranks. We are exempt from advertising our positions at that level. So what we do is we have a running list where we offer positions to people who have sent their CVs into us. A number of those people have done work experience with us before, or have engaged with other work experience in other areas. So they've got some exposure and know what we do and want to come here. So what do we look for? I hate to focus on the people side of it. We don't need the smartest lawyers. We've got some smart lawyers, but we need people who are good at telling stories and engaging with people to help them tell their stories. So when I go to court, I'm telling somebody else's story. So it's not always about a murder, or it can be an assault. It can be something being stolen from a house. But it's about telling the story of how that happened and how that was investigated and the evidence that supports it. So we're looking for people who are good at interacting with other people. We're also looking for people who are resilient. And so part of what we look for is the extracurricular stuff as well. You know, don't undersell the skills that you get doing other things. Customer service, whether that's at McDonald's or you're working in a shop or you're working in as a waitress or a waiter somewhere, it's that personal interaction, it's that pressure that you put under, it's how you deal with those sort of things, which I think in reality all employers are looking for are people who are well-rounded. And you're not necessarily well-rounded just because you've got a degree, okay? So from our perspective, we're looking for people who are enthusiastic, people who see staying in crime, but we're realistic enough that people now will have a number of careers in what they do. And I support what Danielle says about trying before you buy. The real opportunities in the law to go and be a fly on the wall and watch what happens and get talking to people. So if you're sitting in the back of the district court and you're watching a trial, that nobody will take offence if you walk up to the prosecutor and say, hi, I'm in my whatever year at Griffith, I'm interested in the criminal law, can I have a bit of a chat to the trial about the trial with you? Or the defence counsel and those sort of things. And also people watching is really, 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 really valuable, particularly before the judge comes in. How people treat each other before the judicial officer comes in and how aggressive they are, how they engage with each other, how helpful they are to each other. Are they those sort of lawyers who are there to make sure the whole system works, or are they there to win, or are they there to push people around or do whatever they do? That's a really important part of it. So from our perspective, if you Google the ODPP, we've got an ODPP jobs that you can submit your CV to us and it stays on a list, and we're constantly recruiting throughout the year. So whenever people get promoted or go overseas, not so much now, or onto other jobs in other places, we're looking for people who are available to start with us straight away. And we take people who have legal experience, we take people who don't have legal experience, because we're from a ground-up organisation. We're happy if we think you've got the capacity to educate you and help you become part of our organisation.
Fabulous, thank you. What great advice. Now, Melanie and Brooke have asked some questions, but I think we've dealt with them. Dina's got another one, which I think we haven't quite dealt with, which is really about this point about getting legal experience, work experience. So if experience is so important, how can you go about making sure that you get some? So it's a little bit different to what you're looking for in someone you're going to employ, but how would you recommend people get a bit of the type of experience you're looking for? And actually Todd's point is really good, that, you know, that experience working at, you know, Maya or KFC or whatever is actually important experience too. But I guess we're talking here about legal work experience. Danielle, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so it's a very good question, and Todd is exactly right that there are so many transferable skills that you probably don't realize. I think you need to have a very critical look at your resume, and you know, figure out what sort of experience you have outside of the law or even within law school. I was involved in the LSA for many years, and realizing what skills you have made through those positions and how that can actually assist a firm. One of the most intriguing parts of my interview that, you know, the firm loved about me, which I hadn't actually thought about prior to that, was that during my studies, I actually worked at Apple, and on the floor I was selling, you know, iPhones, iPads, whatever. That type of role, I don't know if anyone's ever walked into an Apple store, hopefully most of you have, but it involves a lot of energy. It involves a lot of sale expertise, and, you know, knowledge of products. But what they found interesting, or at least were very happy about, was that I did have that sale experience. So even just down to something of retail that has nothing to do with law, the fact that I could sell a product to anybody, and particularly at Apple where we were learnt to sell experiences rather than products, was so transferable to law, particularly the type of law that we're doing, where we are dealing on a private basis and, you know, people have to pay our fees. That's a lot of money. I couldn't pay for a lawyer if I was in trouble, to be honest. But you've got to try and explain to the client why you're worth that money. So that's just an example of transferable skills, but have a very critical look at your resume and your experience and figure out how and structure your resume to show and be very clear about what transferable skills you have. Marketing is a very big one at the moment with private law firms because, you know, if you can run an Instagram page and if you can build a website, they're two very big valuable skills for private law firms because they want to know that you can help them get the word out that we're the best. So yeah, have a bit of a think about that and really tailor your resume, I think, for that.
Fantastic. Todd?
I think you need to meet as many lawyers as you can. And one of those is there'll be law firms in your local suburb where you live or near where you live. There'll be barristers, you know, if you're at the Gold Coast at the Griffith campus down there, there aren't that many barristers on the Gold Coast. You can look them up on the bar website and flick them an email and just introduce yourself. Actually put yourself out there and say, hey, I just want to come and have a chat. And they can tell you the same sort of stories that Danielle and I have been telling you. And you can say, you know, is there anything I can do? Can I just come along and watch you in court, get you involved? There's a lot of barristers who then take on clerks, sometimes paid, sometimes unpaid, just to do some of that deviling work for them and help them out. And then all of a sudden you're meeting other barristers, then all of a sudden you're meeting other solicitors, then you're meeting other people, and your network just grows and grows and grows. And you also then have that inside running. So that was the best thing I ever did, was that first work experience when I went into a barrister's chambers. Now, 30 years later, I still talk to the 5 guys who were in those chambers. 2 of them became judicial officers out of it. But their treatment of me was just a wonderful introduction. And because I knew them, all of a sudden I knew 100 other people. And therefore, when it came to what I wanted to do, there was always somebody I could go and talk to. And the generosity amongst, particularly, you know, I can only speak about the criminal guys, but I have some friends who are civil lawyers, despite the fact they're civil lawyers. But lawyers are those who've been through it are really generous with their time and really helpful for the young people starting out, because again, our profession needs to regenerate and continue to generate itself. And unfortunately, at the bar in particular, it's aging. Its average age is in the 50s, which is an issue for us going forward. The criminal bar in particular is shrinking. The number of people that we appear against or who get briefed in criminal matters continues to shrink. And we need good lawyers all around the place. And most of the people who get themselves involved in this part of the profession are outgoing, they are engaging, they are confident people in themselves, and I find a generosity with respect to that. So find some lawyers, hit them up, have a chat with them, and you'll never know what next connection you're going to get out of that.
Fabulous. Thanks so much. Well, look, that was a really great session. Thanks so much to Todd and Danielle for your generosity and giving up your time. And, you know, I just think that's a very good example of exactly what you're talking about, that really there are many members of the legal profession very happy to help out and share their wisdom and knowledge. So we're very grateful to you for doing that. Thanks so much to all our students who've come along and asked such great questions. And yes, there's lots of thank yous now coming in the chat, thanking you for your time and for what was really a great seminar. So I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their afternoon.
Can I just say one last thing, Therese, that
yes,
I'll walk the talk. My email is on the bar website. So if people have got other queries or questions or want to get in contact,